everyone. Welcome to Kudlow. I'm Larry Kudlow. Pleasure to be here. Stocks today closed lower, I guess, across the board. Wall Street may be waiting for President Joe Biden's big announcement on infrastructure. President Biden expected to unveil his plans, this alleged infrastructure plan, I should say, which, frankly, is going to be less about traditional infrastructure and a lot more about the Green New Deal and a massive, across-the-board tax hike. Now, people love infrastructure, but they are not going to love this plan. By the way, also buried in the plan is going to be something called social infrastructure, which will be a massive expansion of the welfare state with no work incentives. And today, we learned a whole bunch of left senators, way left senators, pushing continued automatic extensions of both direct stimulus checks and unemployment insurance. You know, more unemployment insurance gets you more unemployment. We are looking at a universal basic income plan before this is all said and done. And the chances of a bipartisan approach are very low. Democratic leaders have already said they're going to push for 51-vote reconciliation. So between the $3 or $4 trillion price tag, an end to fossil fuels, the biggest tax hike since 1942, along with a gigantic expansion of the welfare state, this is really a pivotal, transformational bill. Just listen now to Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg today.
We're going to continue to look to see success stories like this in communities large and small across the country if we seize the moment that's upon us. A once-in-a-century alignment of demonstrated need, bipartisan interest, public impatience, and I can tell you, a very supportive president leading the way.
Yeah, that's that transformational stuff that I don't really want. Unfortunately, Secretary Pete Buttigieg has already told folks that he intends to subtract roads, not expand them. He's not really a car guy, is he? That was an old radio show we took that from. Look, I hope people understand this. This is a bill born of left-wing ideology. It's driven by class warfare, global warming religion, and a march toward more and more government dependency by those who would normally seek to climb the ladder of opportunity. This package has virtually nothing to do with economic growth. Indeed, the far, far left of the progressive wing of the Democratic Party cares not one whit about economic growth or prosperity or job creation or global competition. We've talked so much about this that I'm not going to walk through all the numbers and details again. But I do want to quote from a superb article from my friend Chris Edwards of the Cato Institute. Here's some facts you probably don't know about. Most of the infrastructure in the U.S. is owned by the private sector. That includes things like power stations, freight railways, pipelines, factories, broadband networks, and more. Now, get this. 65% of our nation's infrastructure is owned by the private sector. That's right, 65%. Then you do have state and local government owning 30%, and that includes things like highways, schools, airports, and so forth. And meanwhile, the federal government owns just 5% of our infrastructure. All right? Dams, postal facilities, I guess mass transit, I don't know, other assets. But while Uncle Sam owns very little, it has a very big mouth because it imposes extensive central planning controls on private infrastructure by using taxes and regulations. One example, private sector broadband providers like AT&T and Verizon. Now, every year they invest more than $50 billion in network infrastructure like 5G. Over time, hundreds of billions of dollars in broadband investment has given us a great start for comprehensive 5G. Now, President Biden wants to provide billions of dollars in subsidies for broadband, but listen to this, of course, his corporate tax hike from 21 to 28% would undermine those very investments, right? Subsidies on one side, but raise taxes on the other. The president's going to take with one hand what he gives with another. Think of technology. Mr. Biden would spend $300 billion on items like competitive capital financing. But at the same time, the president wants to double the top capital gains tax from 20 to 40%, which would likely drive up financing costs or even drive out financing costs. There are many other contradictions discussed by Mr. Chris Edwards of Cato. We're going to try to get him on the show tomorrow night during President Biden's speech. But the point is this: obsessed with central planning and bureaucratic control of the economy, the Biden infrastructure plan in its entirety looks like the gang who couldn't shoot straight. But they're going to shoot a lot, and these shots are going to do enormous damage to our economy. As the Trump derangement syndrome lives on, Team Biden wants to reverse his tax cuts, reverse his regulatory relief, and reverse his energy independence. And in the name of infrastructure, which is really the proverbial Trojan horse, we will see a class war on a grand scale, complete disregard for tax incentives to work, to invest, and take risks. Complete disregard for regulatory burdens that squash small businesses. Complete disregard for the domestic and international security from energy independence. And a complete disregard for the 20-year-old bipartisan welfare reforms in the days of Bill Clinton and Newt Gingrich. They reformed welfare by helping out with a safety net, but provided important working incentives to leave dependents and climb the American dream. Work is a virtue. Have we forgotten that? Work is a godly virtue. Have we forgotten that? Work is a family virtue. Have we forgotten? So the stakes are awfully high here. As I've said before, this is an incredibly transformational set of policies that I believe will do great harm to this country. My key question this evening is whether the Republican Party has a clear-eyed, simple-to-understand alternative to all of this Democratic left-wing grandiosity. In short, what is the GOP response going to be? Not just criticisms, but response.